Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Gerald, and for our new viewers here, welcome to my channel, and for those who are returning back to my channel, welcome back. Thank you for joining us in our last video of this year. This year has definitely been a crazy year, to say the least. When this whole quarantine started, I sort of created this kind of log or journal kind of type thing where I just listed things that happened throughout the year so that I would be able to personally remember this year. And if down the road I'd be able to save this list and be able to show to my grandchildren or their grandchildren and just remember this time that is definitely a once-in-a-lifetime experience. So I just wanted to take the opportunity and read off this list with you guys. I'm not going to read it in any organized way or anything. I'm just going to read through it exactly as I wrote it and just kind of reflect upon what this year has been from my personal point of view, and maybe you guys can relate with some of the things on this list. So let's get to it. For me, this quarantine started on March 17th of 2020. And the reason why I wrote this date is because I think this is the first week that I was out of work. So kind of the week before this whole thing happened, they told us at work that we would most likely be taking an extended amount of time off. They didn't say how long that amount of time was going to be. They told us originally 2 weeks, but it was inconclusive as to when we would actually be getting back to work. So they told us to file for unemployment, and I actually wrote here later on in my list that I ended up not being able to even qualify for unemployment because I wasn't working at the job that I'm currently working at for that long. So that's the reason why I started off my quarantine log as being March 17-ish. So I wrote here, the first thing that I wrote is that most stores are closed and they've been using curbside pickup and delivery. And I wrote under this as limited customer entry, having to wear masks at Wawa. I remember having to wear masks is such a weird concept, and now at the end of the year, wearing masks is the norm, that you see movies and stuff like that with people not wearing masks, and it just feels weird now. And I personally use DoorDash a lot during quarantine. I should be sponsored by DoorDash. I love DoorDash. DoorDash is great. I also wrote that I went on a couple of jogs. Man, I went running so much during quarantine. I think I went running more over the course of the quarantine than I have ever ran my entire life. I just personally didn't want to get fat over quarantine. It was also good motivation and a good hobby to have during quarantine, since we couldn't go to the gym, we couldn't play basketball. I wrote on my list that they locked up the courts in our local parks. So either they locked them up with through the gate, or at the one park, I'll include a picture, they actually chained up the basketball court itself. So going on runs was definitely a great way to stay healthy physically and also mentally. Me and PJ did a pull-up challenge for the beginning part of the quarantine that was recommended by one of these physical therapists that I met at a place that I shadowed at. So we just got a chance to do that. We also did push-ups to stay fit. We basically took weekly trips to Raida's during quarantine. So for those of you who don't know what Raida's is a family-owned business by one of our close family friends. They make Filipino food and it's great, especially their sizzling sisig. Whew, goated. But yeah, so me and PJ basically took weekly trips up there, especially when my dad didn't want to cook, and we would pick it up from there and then drive all the way back. So that was great. So I wrote here how I took a trip to CVS to buy a hair trimmer, and I also went to Wawa that day, and I wore a mask to go there. And there were spaces on the floor to keep distance. And I remember at that time, this was early on, it was such a foreign concept to have spaces on the floor to separate us at that time. But that was interesting. Oh, and I also had this experience at Wawa early on where a guy told me I dropped my pocket and I fell for it. And I just remember that was a bright spot early on, I guess. Oh, me and my dad took a trip to Red Lobster when we had to wait outside for the food, which was also weird to me. Me and PJ went on several trips to get food. Man, me and PJ went to get food together so much during the quarantine, to get McDonald's or to just get anything takeout. Like, we basically lived off of takeout things and takeout foods throughout this whole 2020. I said in this, I literally said verbatim, every time we go out, hand sanitization is a must. I remember, man, hand sanitizer going out of stock early on. It was crazy. People crazy out here. So I said here, Maggie is locked up, but I dropped off food on several occasions. So for those of you who don't know, Maggie was actually kind of like basically not allowed to go out at all throughout this whole year. But what we would do is we would basically almost FaceTime every day. And there's several things that we did together. We watched different series together. We did virtual hangman. We went virtual shopping together through FaceTime. We did our devotionals together. I bought Supreme for her and I dropped it off. And later on in the quarantine, maybe around the summertime, we would have like dates on her driveway where I would come and we would just be in our respective cars. And it was sweet, especially that we couldn't see each other. But yeah, that was definitely the longest amount of time that we weren't seeing each other. Yeah, because I think it was all the way from like March till maybe almost like May or June. Yeah, so it was a long time. All right. We also tried to film several YouTube videos together through FaceTime and stuff like that, and it was hard, but we made it work. I also wrote here kind of along the same lines that we did Zoom devotions with the youth, and just kind of tagging along the same way. We also really did stuff with our church virtually. We weekly did Bible studies for our church, and we still do weekly Bible studies for our church over Zoom. And we also really invested in our live stream for our church services, which was such an interesting experience for me because I was put in charge to do so. So having to do the research for everything and find different resources and stuff like that to be able to do that was such a challenge, but it was a great experience to be able to learn from, definitely. Oh, I put here that the NBA and sports was suspended at that time. They ended up actually doing an NBA bubble. Rudy Gobert was one of the first people I remember to get diagnosed with COVID, and he was just kind of being irresponsible at the time. I'll put in the clip of him kind of touching everything. He was like touching everything, and he didn't know that he was positive for COVID, and he kind of just spread it throughout his whole team, and then different teams needed to get tested and stuff like that. And then because of sports being away, they released a Michael Jordan documentary that went completely viral. Everyone was talking about it, everyone was watching it, and that was just kind of like the thing to watch, especially during this time where no sports was available. It was a really good series. I recommend that you guys watch it if you haven't already. They gave original potential date of return being July 31st. I don't know when they actually returned, but they ended up playing the playoffs and the last remainder games in this NBA bubble is what they called it in Orlando. And the Lakers ended up being the champions, which was cool to watch. What else? I caught up on my Philippines journal. Oh, I tried to grow a mustache during quarantine. It ended up pretty good. If you watch some of my videos over this quarantine period, my mustache kind of grew out. People were commenting on it. A lot of haters out there. You know who you are, the haters out there. I'm looking at you. But I thought it looked pretty good. It it makes you look more manly, you know? It makes you feel more manly. So comment down below if I should try again. Oh, PJ and Maggie did online schooling. So PJ and Maggie actually did their online schooling towards the end of the spring semester for 2020. And then PJ actually finished this semester, winter 2020, online as well. And tying into the same lines, Maggie actually finished school online, or Maggie actually finished at Drexel online altogether, which is definitely an interesting experience to talk about. Oh, I wrote here that I cleaned my room a little. Me and PJ actually had this whole remodeling project over this whole year. We ended up redoing our entire room. We repainted it. It was like this maroon color before, which I liked, but we went for a more kind of neutral color as we're growing older, stuff like that. We redid everything. If you guys want a whole room tour, I'll probably put in some clips of things that are in our room now that weren't in there before. But if you guys want a whole room tour, let me know. Oh, here's something. So one of the first videos that I posted on my YouTube channel was a choir video for our friend Ian. Shout out to Ian. Ian actually reached out and asked if either me or Maggie could edit this video for his vocal group at school, and they were doing the song Canyon Moon by Harry Styles, and that was probably one of the most challenging videos I've ever edited. Well, first off, you had to edit the timing for everyone for singing, and then just make sure all the video feeds lined up with the singing, and it took me around 6 days to do and like 30 hours total to complete the whole thing. And obviously the work paid off. I think it's one of my most watched videos on my YouTube channel, and actually kind of like kicked off this whole YouTube channel. I wrote here a whole bunch of people that we personally know that got tested positive. And I remember early on, it was hard to think that we would even know anybody that would get the virus. But just now looking back throughout the year, there's actually a lot of people that we've personally met that have tested positive, that not necessarily we've had direct contact with, but just people that we know and have gotten tested and have tested positive. So it's a crazy world out there, but hoping everyone is staying safe, hoping everyone's staying healthy. Early on, me and PJ played a lot of Call of Duty Mobile. Since then we've stopped playing it, but I remember that was like a big part since PJ was doing online schooling. We just play COD Mobile together. COD Mobile, man, that was the game to play. Oh, and also with Javen we would play as well. I wrote here that roads are almost always empty. So whenever we would go to pick up something, like it would be a ghost town everywhere. One of the first places that I went to pick up food was Domino's, and I put here that I had to wait outside for the food, which was crazy to me. They actually wouldn't open the door at that time, and I had to put my card in a bin. See, it sounds so crazy looking back at it now, but now it's just like most places, that's their procedure, which is crazy. Oh, I got a Christian brand sponsorship over this quarantine. Shout out to God the Father Apparel. Use my code GeraldM15 for 15% off at checkout. I learned to play some songs on the guitar. I also played a lot of Among Us, but I didn't write that because that was later in the quarantine as well. I also played a lot of Valorant before my PC checked. So hopefully, I don't know, I'll get a new PC soon. I put a list of things that I watched over quarantine. There's probably more, but I don't know when I stopped this list. So what I put on this list was I put Onward on Disney+, Infinity War, there was a Disney sing-along. Me and Maggie watched Wong Fu's Single by 30, the Jordan docuseries, as I already said. Avatar: The Last Airbender was put on Netflix, so I rewatched that. Yeah, there's actually a lot of things that I watched over quarantine. I mean, there's just so much time. I also watched The Boys on Amazon Prime Originals. That was pretty good. One of the other things that I watched was High School Musical, the musical, the series on Disney+. So like coming into this year, I told myself I wouldn't really watch that show because I'm diehard High School Musical fan. Shout out to Zac Efron. But yeah, I don't know. It just looked corny to me. I don't know. It just seemed like a cheesy idea. And then since we had just so much time over this year, I was like, I don't know, I might as well try it. People are already talking about it. Like everyone in our youth group already watched it. So I was like, I'll give it a try. And then I watched it and it was pretty darn good. I mean, it was cheesy and it was definitely quirky, but it was a good series overall. And like the people on that show could legitimately sing. So like I enjoyed it. So I enjoyed it to the point where I actually made a TikTok about people on the show and just kind of like being one of those cringy shippers. And I ended up going viral on TikTok. And I don't know, I think it has like 250,000 views and like 60,000 likes or something like that. So that was also something that happened over quarantine. I went viral on TikTok and I continued to make TikToks and all the rest of the TikToks kind of did pretty well too. But yeah, Oh, so I put here that I went back to work on May 11th of 2020, so I was off for like 2 months. And we at work are kind of staggering schedules to be able to be safe, and we're also like screening patients and stuff like that. So it's definitely interesting to be working during this quarantine. You come into contact with so many people, but at the same time you're trying to be safe. Oh, I did summer schooling. I retook some classes that I wanted to be able to do better in applying to grad school. I started using our DSLR that me and Maggie had. I put here that we threw a surprise grad party for Maggie on June 10th. So kind of tying back into earlier, so Maggie graduated from Drexel. Congratulations to Maggie. It was kind of sad coming into this graduation at the fact that she couldn't celebrate graduation as she would have if we weren't in this situation. So I wanted to be able to allow her to have that kind of celebration and make her feel as though she really did accomplish something, because she did. So we, meaning myself and the youth, threw her a surprise party where they did one of those drive-by honky thingies. It was actually Maggie's sister's idea, Stephanie, to do that. So everyone came and they honked their horns, and she had the opportunity of seeing all of them drive by. And then we just had a small gathering in her backyard on her patio. It was a great time, great vibes. And we also got her this DSLR, the one that I'm filming on right now, the Canon 80D, which was also a pretty interesting experience. If you haven't watched that video, link in my description box below. I put here that as time went on, stuff started opening up again. Indoor dining opened up for a brief period. Lastly, what I put here was all of the controversy surrounding all of the stay-at-home orders, people kind of disagreeing as to whether it was right, whether it was wrong, about mandating wearing masks. I also put here about the death of George Floyd. There was a lot of things happening in the streets. There was a lot of protesting going around the world. So I remember they were having these curfews, and the one in Upper Darby was like 8 p.m. so you couldn't leave your house by 8 p.m. I think in Philadelphia it was even earlier. But yeah, it was definitely a year where people were definitely challenged in their social views and in their views of the world around us, which was definitely interesting. Also, I didn't put this on my list, but I also voted in this year's election, which was also a very polarizing election. So I mean, to say the least, that this year was definitely a very polarizing, crazy year. Everything people believe in has definitely been put on display during this year. So with that note, I'm just gonna close this video by kind of just having a general overview of the year. So I don't know really when I stopped this list. I think I stopped it in September. And since then, there's also been a million other things that have happened. And we actually went out for PJ's birthday in November, in which we all had to get tested, if you've watched that video already. So there's just been a lot of things that have been happening this year. And I always tell people that whenever people ask me about this year, I just always describe it as just such a crazy year, because I feel like that's the only way you can kind of just describe it and summarize it, just because crazy is such a blanket term that you can use to cover everything that's happened this year. But I think amidst all of the crazy things that have happened this year, it's definitely been a lesson for most of us, even myself, for how we can just appreciate, you know, the small things that we're given in life, and how we can easily take these things for granted, how we just get caught up in our day-to-day routine. All of a sudden, those things are taken away from us. So my hope for myself in the new year, and my hope for everyone who's watching this video, is that we can be more grateful for what we have in life, and that we can come into the new year with a refreshed look at ourselves and the refreshed look in how we live our lives. And I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you want more videos like this, I don't think I can provide more videos like this. 2020 only happens once. So yeah, deuces everyone.